Okay. In addition to the three types of traditional payment methods, next, we'll introduce two newly innovated methods. In international trade, on one hand, the buyer wants to be certain that the seller is in a position to honor his committing as contracted. On the other hand, the seller must be assured of receiving payment so as to accept an open account business. Such security may be obtained through banks in the form of guarantee. A bank guarantee is a written promise issued by a bank at the request of its customer, undertaking to make payment to the beneficiary within the limits of a stated sum of money in the event of default by the principal. A bank guarantee may also be defined as an independent obligation where the guarantor has to make a special agreement with its customer, ensuring that it will be refunded by him for any payment to be effected under the contract of guarantee. Usually, there are three parties involved in the guarantee practice: applicant or principal is the person at whose request the guarantee is issued. The principal will be claimed if he is in breach of his obligation. Then, guarantor is the bank that issued a letter of guarantee, undertaking to make payment to the beneficiary in the event of default of the principal against the presentation of a written demand and other specified documents. He isn't required to decide whether the beneficiary and the principal have or have not fulfilled the obligations under the underlying transaction with which the guarantee is not concerned. The guarantor is willing to meet its commitment in terms of the guarantee without becoming involved in possible disputes between the beneficiary and the principal. The third party is the beneficiary, who is the party in favor of the guarantee. He is secured against the risk of the principal's not fulfilling his obligations towards the beneficiary in respect of the underlying transaction for which the guarantee is given. In addition to the above three parties, sometimes a bank or a financial institution may act as an instructing party at the request of the principal and issue a counter-guarantee in favor of a bank or a financial institution located in the beneficiary's country. The instructing party instructs the bank in the beneficiary's country to issue a guarantee on behalf of the principal in favor of the beneficiary. Such a guarantee is also called an indirect guarantee. Therefore, there are four parties in an indirect guarantee. That is, the applicant, the instructing party, the guarantor, and the beneficiary. Bank guarantee is widely used as an instrument for securing performance or payment, especially in international businesses. There are a number of different types of guarantees or bonds from different points of view and according to different requirements. In terms of the relationship with the underlying transaction, guarantees can be classified into accessory guarantee and independent guarantee. Accessory guarantee is an accessory contract by which the guarantor undertakes to answer for the debt, default, or miscarriage of another person known as the principal debtor. The accessory guarantee is traditional guarantee, which is a secondary undertaking and a promise to carry out someone else's obligation if the party primarily responsible fails to do so. Therefore, the guarantor's obligations are accessory to and dependent on the contract in the respect of which they are given. In this case, it's easy for the guarantor to get involved in the disputes between the principal and the beneficiary in the underlying contract. This will do harm to banks. That's why, as time passed by, accessory guarantee was gradually taken place by independent guarantee. Independent guarantee is independent of the underlying contract. It is a promise to pay a sum of money against presentation of the beneficiary's demand and the specified documents. The guarantor isn't concerned to determine whether or not a default has occurred on the commercial deal. Their payment is triggered by presentation of a claim complying with the formed requirements of the guarantee. In terms of the condition for a claim, a guarantee may be classified into unconditional and conditional bond. Unconditional bonds can be called at the discretion of the beneficiary. The bank must pay if called upon to do so, even in circumstances where it may be clear to the exporter that the claim is wholly unjustified. If the bank has to pay under the bond, it will debit the customer's account under the counter indemnity. The bank never becomes involved in contractual disputes. If the payment is called for, which conforms to terms of the bond, the bank must pay. Conditional bonds can be divided further into two types: bonds requiring documentary evidence and the bonds not requiring documentary evidence. Conditional bonds requiring documentary evidence give maximum protection to the principal. Payment can only be called for by the beneficiary against presentation of a specified document, such as a certificate of award by an independent authority. Unfortunately, this type of bond is often unacceptable, particularly in the case of Middle East transactions. Conditional bonds that don't require documentary evidence are less better than unconditional bonds from the beneficiary's point of view. Such bonds often specify that payment must be made in the event of default or failure on the part of the contractor to perform his obligations under the above-mentioned contract. In reality, which types of guarantee is used depends on the relative advantage of the buyer and the seller in the trade and their negotiation abilities.